Hey, welcome to 23 Degrees Sideways. I'm a little wind-blown right now. I was walking in a rainstorm because that is what you do in monsoon season. Zeihan on politics, the guy, Peter Zeihan, he was recently on Chris Williamson, Chris Will X. I don't really know. Both of them, great guys, fantastic. I had some comments that I want to do about the video, about this podcast itself, this interview. And in a normal, I have a desire to sit down side by side with the video, go through point by point, make my notes, and tell you some stuff. It's about an hour and a half worth of stuff. But there are 5 people who are going to watch this video, unless something happens and it blows up. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to give you the high points. Go watch the episode. It's Chris Williamson. It's really easy to spell. And it's Peter Zeihan, which is Z, as in Zeus. E-I-H-A-N, I think. You can find this stuff online. So Peter, I've watched Peter's stuff off and on. He's one of the analysts I really like because he's wrong in various ways, but he's right in various ways, and the way it matches up really works with the way I like to look at things, my counter-analysis. I like to do counter-analysis. And as an analyst, he has a strong tendency to rely on a kind of a model approach, modeling and big networks and all of that. And that's really good up to a point, but it doesn't work all the time. And so when I'm doing these analyses, when I'm listening to the analysts, especially when I'm listening to analysts, but also I read analysts while I'm out walking, while I'm engaging with people. I'll read a little bit and then I'll go walk through a store. I'll walk through an event. I'll do a park. I'll do a softball game. I walk around and I experience. I do not just raw social interactions, but other things. I go look at things on a ground level, and I think that he misses that. And I think that in this video in particular, there are some things that he's not connecting the dots on in a way that is less than ideal. For example, he talks about piracy becoming a much bigger problem in the United States as the guarantor of shipping stepping out of that role. On the one hand, he's right that that's the historical model. And it's a model that really, really applies to the 1950s, the 1960s, even the 1980s. Even at our worst, lowest point, we were still doing that, the late 70s. But the model has changed technologically more than I think Peter can recognize, because he's stuck in a particular worldview, a model. So with piracy, in particular, because that's one large part of the video, littoral, local, African warlord, piracy, is going to be a problem that the United States can solve instantly the moment it has a desire to do so. And, the gist of that is that anything that is that close to shore, we can shut off in a day, a week, just by having the willpower to do so. All the systems are in place. We have brown water ships, we have drones, we have cruise missiles, we have everything we need to do the job with very little risk. And actually, honestly, not that much money involvement either, especially if we have allies who can do most of the manpower work for us, and we do. And they're local, and they're puppet governments, whatever. We can do that. Littoral, like cleaning up the African warlord piracy is not a problem. I don't know why we haven't done it. We could, pretty close to instantly. Privateers, which is another form of piracy that he's talking about coming back. So blue water piracy is what this is. That is a different story. That is, like he says, lots and lots of destroyers, except what he means is frigates, out patrolling, FFGs, running around patrolling the waters and preventing that from happening. That's a really good model. It's a really good way to look at it. But it's not necessary. So there's a thing called an Aegis bubble. Okay, Aegis is a military thing. We have a bubble. He talks about this. He actually literally talks about this later in the interview, but he does not connect the dots. An Aegis bubble is basically, it's a bubble. It's a network of ships. Think of it like a LAN or the internet. It's a network of the sensors, the weapons, the positions, all the stuff on all the ships in a fleet. This is why our supercarriers are very hard to kill, is because we have this Aegis bubble. We have this big bubble. Okay, we have the Aegis class cruisers, and so it's a network of observation, weapons, sensors, everything. And it provides this dome, this bubble. It's literally called an Aegis bubble. And it's a bubble because it includes submarines that protects the fleet. The thing is that was great and required a lot of ships and stuff in the 70s and in the 80s. And at this point in history, you can do a lot of that work with very little of that scale of equipment. You could do it, theoretically, you could do this out of a container ship or 5 or 6 container ships traveling together. That would be a way to do it. With drones and a couple of computers. And this is almost off-the-shelf technology. This is pretty much like repurposing. I can think of some apps, some crowd apps that we use to like avoid police and things that could be repurposed for this. You could do this almost off the shelf. It's not quite an instant deployment. And that would give you sensors. That would give you the ability to know if something that is not in your list of safe approaches, and this is anything bigger than a dolphin will trigger this stuff, right? Gets into your bubble. If it gets into your bubble, it's a threat. You can respond to the threat. You can respond to the threat in different ways. If you are, I've looked at Middle Eastern security systems that are completely autonomous and will kill people. Like there are tripwire alarms that have literally just 25 shotgun shells will fire through a door, like stuff like that. There are autonomous systems. You can do an autonomous system. That's going to make a lot of people in the West very angry because then innocent people will die. But if you're not dealing with Western shipping and Western people, you probably get away with it. That's perfectly fine. But also, you don't have to go that far. All you need is one team, one crew on one of the ships that is aligned with, employed by, enlisted in one of the major militaries, and they can take care of it. You can take care of it with a manned drone or a piloted drone strike. They're not manned, but a piloted drone strike will take care of anything that's a problem. You don't need much. The problem with piracy is as after contact is made. If you prevent contact, this isn't the early 1800s. It's not a standoff where your 4-pound guns are firing at each other in broadsides or anything. Piracy is very expensive and has a very high cost and very high risk, and one 10-pound warhead on a drone is going to ruin your day and make this not a profitable venture. So that's it. It's this kind of thing that not necessarily that specific system, but it's this kind of thinking that the modelers, the model-based analysts don't consider. The solution to piracy is probably going to be crowdsourced, if it goes that way. So global shipping, maybe. He likes to talk about globalism, and he likes to use that map, and I think that he tries to avoid talking about American hegemony in the proper context. Like, he admits that it's there. He admits that the U.S. has been the policeman for the world trade, for what he calls globalism, but he doesn't really admit the hegemony or the empire part of that as much as I think he should, because that's actually important to maintaining it. We were going to have to get something out of it. So I think he's wrong there. I do think I don't think the piracy is going to be a major problem. I don't think that global trade is going to just go away the way he predicts it will. I think that it's possible it could, but it would take an actual effort by the United States to purposefully make it unstable and dangerous to do shipping. Where we have a system in place, it works, and it's adaptable, and we can make it much cheaper and easier. We would have to actually deliberately fuck it up at this point. So that's the thing, and he knows what an ages bubble is. I know he knows, but he hasn't thought about modernizations of the ages bubble or crowdfunded, crowdsourced, multiple sourced. He hasn't brought the ages bubble into the internet in his thinking. So I think he's wrong there. I don't disagree with him about the population stuff. I do disagree with his idea on how it affects industry and capital. For example, he says that automation, artificial intelligence as a function of being, or as a way to do automation, is great, but that you have to shut down everything and start programming from scratch every time you change a component of your car or something. That's not true. So if you're old enough to remember the standardization wars, we had the standardization wars, and that's what actually made the IBM PC take the field in personal computing, was that we had standard buses and standard parts, and you could swap them out, and different companies can make them, and all companies can make CPUs, and they would all fit on the boards. Standardization means that if you change a component and you have to retrain your AI, reprogram your AI manufacturing process, you only have to do it for that little component. And that does not take that much effort. It doesn't take that much time. It doesn't require a large team of people to do it all at once. You can go through phases. Different components change at different times, and so your team can move around. So it doesn't require as much labor or as much production stoppage as he thinks it does. So I think he's wrong there. I think he's just wrong. I think the AI, and we're not looking at general AI, we're looking at AI in terms of how it helps with manufacturing, specifically in this context. I think that he's right, that it helps immensely and it takes away a lot of the problems with workforces and population bombs, like little population bombing, not population exploding. I just don't think he understands how you can reduce the scale and the iterations, in the sense that I used to have neighbors in another town who made control boards, literally circuit boards, for air-to-air missiles. They were a government contractor, disabled veteran, private thing, and they ran it out of a little metal shed in their backyard. I'm not kidding. It was a full thing. I used to take their empty alcohol tins and use them to put water in to keep my greenhouse warm. That's what they did. They were a contractor. We have a lot of that, and that's the kind of thing where that level, if you have that automated to free up the people because people are getting scarce, then you reprogram that when a change comes, but you don't stop the whole entire industrial process of missile production because one little 20 by 30 foot metal building is going through reprogramming. You see, you do this in an iterative and small sequence. I don't think he understands distributive technologies as they apply here, or as they apply in the real world, as they actually exist now. So there's a blind spot. I don't think that is being calculated for. So the artificial intelligence and the automation absolutely replaces a lot of the workforce needs if you have the ability to maintain the systems. And this is the part where I don't think we're talking the same language in a lot of society. A lot of people think that is expensive and requires all of the low-level labor and all of the industrial, and it requires people who understand systemology, which is something of a made-up term. It's a real term, but something of a made-up term, and it's used a lot in when talking about navies, for example. So the Aegis bubble, the ability to float a carrier group across the world, to just go travel around the world, requires a lot of systemology, a lot of understanding of how all the systems work, and being able to keep them running and not have the basic breakdowns that you have with a lower motivation, low independence, and very rule-bound kind of society. You have to have independent thought and initiative to make systemology work. Well, we excel at that. In fact, Americans excel at that to the point where we can barely keep our country running sometimes. But it's a good thing, all right? That is what makes the automation, the artificial intelligence, the programming actually work, okay? That's good. So I think we actually have that kicked. I think we have that kicked in a way that he doesn't really want to admit, because he's still thinking about industrial age processes for industry and not thinking about post-information age technologies for industry. So there's that. He did mention that we're very close to full artificial intelligence for farming, but he mentioned, the big $2 million tractor, so it's got to be a large farm. Well, that's true, but that's not true. A lot of people are doing this on a small scale on homesteads with their own greenhouses and Raspberry Pis. So I think that this is possible to do on a very small scale. I also think that he's kind of missing the boat on animal agriculture, because animal agriculture gives you more nutrition density with less management of inputs, less necessity of management of inputs, and I think that's actually a solution in a way that the whole world will not accept seeing until the message changes. The message is that meat is horrible and awful and everything is bad about it, and the truth is meat is how you turn plants into nutrition with the least amount of labor input. That's very simple, and labor input is what he's talking about having a shortage of as the population drops, as the younger population drops. So there's a couple areas where I think he's missed things. I think he's mostly right about China. I think that China may self-destruct even more rapidly and more bizarrely than he thinks. Xi Jinping actually does have the ability to insist on a stupid resource war with Vietnam to try to feed a starving population, and they're going to get their butts pungied, and it's not going to work. And then, of course, there's the whole, food crisis is coming now, winter is coming now, so hey, invade Russia. Because invading Russia in winter is always a good idea. And the Chinese should totally do that to get some extra food. It's not going to go well, but they could. I mean, the thing is, that's actually in the realm of reasonable possibility. They might look at Taiwan, and his analysis of Taiwan is very good. Taiwan has been preparing to defend every square inch of the island from the Maoists for 60 years, and they have, it is an unbelievably tough nut to crack if you want to occupy it. If you just want to nuke it, then you're going to get nuked back. You're going to lose, China's dead. If they do that, but if they try to take it over, they're dead anyway. But they do have the PLA, and they might just say, hey, if you want to eat dinner, you've got to take it from the Russians. It's going to go badly, and no one wants to think of that's realistic, but it might actually be realistic, especially if the food thing in China gets bad. It's going to go very badly for them. I've been of the opinion for a long time that Russia and the United States should be in a broad alliance and forming a global hegemony. We could have a civilizing influence on the Russians, hopefully a little bit, and maybe give them a little more party atmosphere, and it can work. So I don't know what's going to happen with China. I think that he might actually be too conservative in how bad he says the China situation actually is. Too conservative. And no, their military hasn't gotten that much better. They built all these ships and this stuff, and they can't, he talks about how in a wartime situation, most of them won't get 600 kilometers. and supply and everything. And I'm like, yeah, but 50% of them aren't going to make it out of port. So there's that factor as well. They have major problems with floats. Power projection in China is not going to work. They can't project power. Everyone knows it. That's about it. Like there's a couple of areas where I just don't think. I think that the data is being resisted because of certain models or certain preferences for modeling. Like no one models bison into agriculture in his analysis. When you look at the future of farming, how can you make it better? No one's going to put bison in there. They're going to put robots in your tractors to take care of the plants on an individual level, which is fantastic if you want tomatoes and lettuce and stuff. We don't need this for wheat. We don't need this for staples. What we need for staples is actually bison, beef, lamb, goat, the ruminants. And the best way to handle that is actually, we can already microchip and track them and see what their health is doing. We can also detect what they're eating, what the moisture level is. They're little mobile sensor platforms, little 1,200-pound mobile sensor platforms, and we can track everything with them. And it's much better coverage than any artificially created linear sensor network. So there's that. Okay, I think that sometimes the modelers are using models that miss things. The people on the ground want meat. The movements in agriculture right now, you have to look at what's actually happening. He's willing to acknowledge that American politics is weird and that we have weird stuff that we do, but he's not always willing to acknowledge that those weirdnesses have effects. Like we can change the course of history with one populist movement, and that is very scary, but that's part of the US. I think he's a little bit too down on Trump. He is one of the few analysts who's willing to say positive things. Trump has done some very good things. Renegotiating NAFTA, he'll note over and over again, he does this in several videos, that Trump goes down in history for renegotiating NAFTA because that was a master stroke for America. True, but find the 5 other things that the news won't report on that he did right, and I'll talk to you. He just really doesn't like Trump, so there's that influence, that tendency to not look at things that possibly should be looked at. I think he underplays the importance of Turkey. I'm not sure. So France is Frankish, and they will absolutely get out the guillotine and the muskets in a heartbeat. So France is the dominant power in Europe. Yeah, unless Germany manages to defeat France this time. They never seem to get that. I mean, they haven't done that since, 1873, 1874? The last time they beat France, it was in the 1870s, I think. Maybe 1880s. So unless Germany does something dramatic, France is going to rule Europe. I think that the UK has a better chance of getting into a North Sea alliance than he's willing to look at, Mr. Zeihan, and that is a power center. He's talking about energy. Energy is the source. Energy is the baseline of all of this stuff, and then the North Sea exists. No one's talking about it. It's a big deal. I think the UK could go that direction. Turkey, I think he's actually underplaying. I think that Turkey is it. I think that when it comes down to it, Turkey is going to be the ones that contain Iran. And it's going to get really weird, and there's going to be some sort of... It's going to be bad for the Kurds, because the Turks just hate the Kurds, and the Kurds are not in a good position. No one's going to ally with them, and nothing else in that region is going to get strong. It's going to be Turkey again. That's why we keep getting Byzantine empires, Ottoman empires, and all of that, is that Turkey is in the right spot with the right stuff, and they're in the bestest spot with the mostest stuff. The only other dominant power in that region is probably going to be Israel. And I think that once people have something more to concern themselves with than conspiracy theories about Israel, Israel's going to be left alone a little bit, and they're going to take a little more territory, and then a little more territory, and they're going to be a dominant power in the region. They already basically own all of the technology. They are it. They are in a position where if the religion thing wasn't a problem, they would be able to make a civilizational center of the Middle East. So that's the thing. Long video. I'm getting kind of off into the weeds, and I'm getting off of the topics that he actually talked about. But those are the high points of my response to his video. Is he's underplaying Turkey. He's ignoring the North Sea, and the UK has a very good axis for going with the North Sea. Kind of a reverse Viking invasion concept, or maybe just invite the Danes again because Danegeld. China could fracture more dramatic. China could be in a 6-way civil war next spring. It is actually that bad. I don't think the food problem is going to be as bad globally as he thinks it is. I think it's going to be very isolated and regional, and China may get that, and if China gets that, it's all over for China. I don't think he's willing to apply technology in outside-of-the-box fashions or accept that outside-of-the-box things happen all the time with our technologies, and he's stuck in an industrial set of models for his analysis, and that they don't really apply now. They don't apply in the age of Ring surveillance, for example, Ring doorbells or Chromecast. It just doesn't apply. That's all I've got. Have a good one.